Oh my god. Okay, well, Jesus. Okay, I guess we're ready. I guess we can finally do this now. So after
I'll,
after an hour and a half of technical difficulty, so the layout is different because now we're using Zoom instead of Discord. But
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I'm sure that we'll have to play around with Discord to see what goes on with that.
right.
But
So yeah,
I
what's
mean,
up?
uh, uh, I am so between having some people in my family freak out and nothing bad,
Nothing bad.
nothing bad. Waking up and having to deal with some malware and
Oh yay, that's always fun.
yeah, and then just I because I'm learning how to code, so on that part too, then it's
Right.
all of that combined equals I was up late, and then you had a 4-month-old, and
Fun stuff.
yeah, I'm tired as fuck.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
get your energy moving, I guess, as we talk. So what did you have to bring to the table today?
So I think that there's several things that we have to do, and one might be math and public health knowledge, but I
Math.
feel like
Math.
just people are really bad at math, man. People are really bad at math.
Okay, that's a good start.
Yeah.
I
So
might be
let's
one of
talk.
those people.
You're an accountant, dude.
Well, okay, so accountant is less to do about math, but in terms of like its complexity, like math with accounting is pretty basic. At most, it doesn't go as far as algebraic. Other than that, it's not anything like you're doing something like with calculus or stuff like that. Like but if we're talking math within that context, yeah, I could probably hold this conversation pretty well with you. But
Yeah, no, I'm not even talking about calculus, man. I mean, like the applicability of calculus is like, okay, are we looking at physics? Are we trying to do integrals? Are we trying to basically map the laws of nature?
okay,
Um, most people don't need that. I think most people need some form of algebra. I mean, it'd be nice if they understood like geometry and like the concepts of proof and logic, but there's that too.
okay. So
But more so like statistics. I think between statistics and basic algebra, I don't think that should be too much to ask.
I don't regularly use statistics much in my field, but I would say so. Like, okay, so where are we going with this in terms of just statistics and health?
So primarily, like if you're looking at math within the realm of public health, you're primarily looking at the field of statistics, standard distributions, and a little more complex stuff like post hoc analysis and like multivariate contributions.
Okay.
And I don't expect most people to understand how to perform those, but they should understand how to read them, right? It's like you don't need to understand the general theory of relativity in order to be able to use a GPS.
True. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though that device uses it, somebody's already done all the work for you. But understanding that the world isn't flat is a big important thing to deal with that, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like a difference between somebody making the machine and somebody being able to operate said machine.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So the basic principle on like multivariate analysis would basically be like, okay, to make things relevant, what is a compounding risk factor for death associated with coronavirus or with an anxiety attack, right? Like those things will go with that.
Right. Okay.
Well, if you have heart disease and you've had a heart attack, the chance of you dying, or if you catch it, are much, much higher.
Yes.
Right. If you, in order to think about it, if we think about like general chances of dying, it's about 6% according to the data that we have now.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about if you have any form of cardiovascular disease, which is about 50% of the population within the United States,
Yeah, it's
you have a
pretty high.
10% chance of dying, right? Which is significantly higher. Now, that's not adjusted for age.
Mm-hmm.
So when we adjust it for age, we can then look at what are the chances of you if you have, I'm in this age category, plus I have several issues associated with my heart. Well, all of a sudden that can dramatically shift what your percentage is.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't have any underlying like health conditions, now it depends on what you consider a health condition. We people think about I'm completely healthy, right? Well, are you depressed? Well, sure, but is that more of a systemic issue with our culture or anything else?
Yeah.
But the chance of dying from COVID, regardless of age, is 0.9%, which is still 10 times deadlier than being in an active duty in military. So
and again, we're at war with the virus, so just remember, keep that in mind.
Exactly, and I think that's something that people need to consider about when we're looking at the statistics. Is basically not everyone's signing up to go into an active combat zone, but when somebody doesn't put on their mask, they're putting other people at risk, and it just to habituate that, wear your fucking mask.
I was going to add in terms of like other health conditions. I mean, I think we also probably shouldn't factor in like any type of respiratory behavior like asthma. I mean, I'm slightly asthmatic, so I would say that my chances of death increase a lot just because I don't know what other type of respiratory, like emphysema, stuff like that.
So you can have pleurisy, which is basically a rubbing. It's like an inflammation of the layers within the lung. You can have other forms of chronic obstructive pulmonary disorders, or COPD. That's like the emphysema that most people think about. That's not used as much within it. Most of the time, they just slap on that data. You can also have a restrictive breathing capacity issue. Just where you're not able to expand your lungs as much.
Would that include like people who are like obese in a sense too, because like they're already having trouble breathing, or like because they have stuff like sleep apnea too, like if they're laying down?
So when we're looking at assessing an individual for their respiratory capacity, we're usually basing it on their weight. Because, and this is something that
well, it's just more work for the diaphragm to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, you still have to supply that tissue with the necessary metabolic processes, right? Even if it's fat, there's still blood going to it. So you have to breathe more. And in the same situation, if I always like watching MMA fights, as much as like a healthcare professional, I'm like, oh no, we should try to protect those people, right? Well, I mean, they're willing adults and they want to give each other brain damage. That's cool.
Well, you do you. You do you. Say I love me.
Yeah, you guys signed up to hurt each other. No one else is going to be involved. That's whatever.
Yeah.
So if you look at the bigger guys, they actually gas out earlier.
Right.
And it's because mass is mass. It doesn't matter if you're roided out and jacked or if you're, obese with adipose tissue. You still have to supply that with oxygen.
True.
So even like the heavyweights, right? They're not going to last as long as the other guy. The smaller machine is more efficient. Speaking of that, I don't know if you know who Hafthor Bjornsson and Eddie Hall are.
I don't know who these people are. I'm assuming they're fighters. Well, wait, isn't Bjornsson the actor that played the Mountain?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I know him at least. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So they have Hafthor Bjornsson, he's like 6'9" and like 440 pounds.
Right.
He's won the world's strongest man, and then Eddie Hall. He's a former world's strongest man winner.
Okay.
And he is currently 362 pounds according to Google.
Okay.
So he's the smaller of the two. He's, when the small man's, I think, like
Is this a
six.
mass versus density argument that you're going for here?
No,
Okay.
no. This is just a thing that's come aside. So Eddie Hall is 6'3" and 360, and he is the small guy,
Okay.
right? But basically they're huffing and puffing, and they're, oh, you're a cheater, you're a fake, all the rest of it. Let's throw down in a boxing ring. Which it's the heaviest boxing match in history. Well,
Right. Yeah, I know. I actually saw that advertised. I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah. Anybody that understands that will then go, man, I hope those guys have been training cardio, because they're both going to need to lose more weight, which is going to make them less competitive in strength sports. But
Yeah.
you gotta feed the machine. But just a little aside, I am not paying money for that.
Okay.
However, would I pay money for people to have better health literacy and just a better understanding of math? You better believe it.
Right.
So that's a little disjointed, but I think it's an important thing that we just don't place enough emphasis on.
Well, speaking of statistics, I made something a little while back. It's basic statistics, as in tallying deaths and stuff. But since the president says that we're at war with COVID, I thought it would be appropriate to share our casualties compared to other wars that we have fought. So this works, right? Let me just see this. Okay. Wait a minute. Oh, did not share right. Oh, fuck. Hang on. Can you see anything?
I can.
What do you see?
I see your nice screen there, man.
Like, is it mountains?
This is mountains right now. What you had before with your graph, I could see that when it was
Okay,
here.
hang on. Let me. I think I showed the wrong screen. Yeah, let's just show the photo. Okay, do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. All right. Okay. So if it doesn't work, I'll just put it in editing if people can't see it. But it's a little wonky, but this is a little outdated. I think I made this at the beginning of the month, May 5th. It's pretty much most of the American wars that we fought, from the Revolutionary War up to today. So the numbers with COVID are obviously a little outdated. As when I recorded this, tallied these numbers, it was May 5th, and we just got over the 70,000 death rate. As if I'm not mistaken,
just for an update right now, according to Google, it is 980.
Okay.
So 98,169 deaths.
So we are just approaching 100,000 mark, which incidentally is pretty close to the number of deaths that we as a nation faced in World War I.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say probably by the middle of June we're gonna surpass World War I deaths. Which, if you look, is technically the third most destructive war that we have fought in terms of life lost. Now, honestly, you can see that there's a big jump between deaths from World War I to World War II. So, I want to be wrong on this, and far be it from me to bet on people's deaths. But what is it? Fauci was saying, we could get up to 200,000 deaths by the end of this year.
Yeah, and that's within the 2020 compared to the Spanish flu, which was 1917 to 1918.
Yeah. Speaking of, so I remembered recording the American. What was 100 million deaths from Spanish flu worldwide. American deaths, it was around 800,000. So I forgot to include that. But
yeah, it's 700,000 to 800,000.
Yeah.
The the about 1/3 of the population was infected during the Spanish flu, and the
And
mortality.
what? How many Americans have been affected right now? It's very low still.
It's very low.
Yeah.
The percentage is relatively low, and it's difficult to even get a good handle on it. So
Right.
like let's look at Michigan, which is a harder hit state.
Mm-hmm.
They're only having a 12% positive rate, 12% positive rate. And when you're looking at that, we have to understand that when you're testing people, you're testing them because they think they have it.
No, yeah,
So,
I know.
so that heavily skews. That heavily skews.
Well, it
what
shows
you're-
that we're under testing. Like there could be more.
Yeah, their mortality rate is around 13.5%. So what you could suggest is if you're just using the basic 6% number, you're looking at we're basically doing half of the people that have gotten tested that should, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
At least half are going underneath the radar. If we want to go for the 3%, which was being told earlier, then we're looking at a quarter of the people that we want are getting tested. And once we understand the skewing effect of that, and it's very simple math on that part, right? You just got to compare percentages and understand what we're projecting at it.
Kevin, you're muted. Sorry, say that
I'm
again.
muted now?
No, you're good. I just didn't hear what you were just said like 5 seconds ago.
Oh, there's people that will argue for that these prisoners got it, right? Like this massive infestation, or they'll say all lives matter, right? But then they immediately go and say,
how quickly that has changed.
Yeah. But then they'll go, oh, but everyone that died is 75 years old. And I'm like, wait, you just told me that all lives matter. So,
well, I think we can at this point surmise that the slogan "All Lives Matter" was just a bullshit term to begin with. It was just a talking point to deflect from all lives matter was just a talking point to deflect from the notion of systemic racism in our country. When basically saying everybody has problems, when it's well, everybody may have problems, but some people are suffering more than others, and that dilutes that perspective. But
all lives matter just really smells of the 3/5 compromise to me.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you count, but you're less.
All lives matter is a white privilege statement.
Yeah. Oh, your life matters just as much as mine. And then the blue lives matter is quite literally
blue lives matter is a fucking bastardization of black lives matter, because they, if you have to understand the context of blue lives matter, that is police officers risk their lives. You understand that the inner context of that statement. So you from the very get-go understood what Black Lives Matter meant in the contextual framework of how it was being said by the protesters.
Well, the thing that people that they're failing to recognize in the Blue Lives Matter statement or anything like that is that literally it is the safest period in time to be a police officer, despite the narrative that there was a war on police. Thankfully, that's been dropped.
Mm-hmm.
But when we move on to the next part, it's dude, it's more dangerous to be a construction worker or a truck driver. why aren't we talking about that?
Right.
It's just more so people wanting to support the oppressive prison state that the United States has come to profit so dearly on.
Yeah. Okay. So didn't you have something you wanted to talk about in terms of rights or something, property rights or something like that?
It was actually in relation to that video.
Oh, okay. Do you just want to go straight to that video and just do our first reaction video?
So okay. We can go reaction video because I think it's a nice thing to move on to that. It's
okay. So we talked enough about statistics, deaths, and COVID because we kind of covered a little about that in the last episode. I just don't want to keep depressing people. So how about a palate cleanser?
Yeah,
So
palate cleansing with a little
Well,
logic, ideally.
this is well, it's interesting because it also is in relation to our past episode. We talked about counterpoints as cringe because what we're about to do is what we would call outgroup cringing, right? If I'm not mistaken, because we're cringing at other people's, axiomatic views, like their political outlook of the world. So Matt Christian, just to point out, this is a video by YouTuber Matt Christensen. So I don't know this guy. This is the only video that I've seen of him, and this was I have seen this video before, but I don't really remember a lot of it because it was shown to me by someone that I used to argue with on Facebook a lot a few months ago. Kevin knows. So
sometimes you just gotta purge the infection, dude. Yeah, I'm just glad you didn't need to lose the limb. Okay, it was looking rotten.
But I mean, this basically was I guess he was trying to show me his contextualized framework of what he thinks rights are. So now this Matt Christensen guy, I don't know him. So if people are like, Matt Christensen is he does this, like I really don't know. I've seen one video of him and I watched it. Like he's not, for me, he comes off, he tries to come off as this, like, I mean, he's right wing, but he's trying to present himself as sort of this very libertarian-esque type of person. He is definitely somebody who isn't like he's trying to talk very intellectually, but he at least isn't somebody like prophetically stupid like Steven Crowder or a total grifter like Tim Pool and Dave Rubin. So I'm gonna give this guy the benefit of the doubt, and we're gonna listen to him. So,
oh, you mean he isn't told by his dad what to say?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that he is his own manager, and I'm sure that he's not afraid to debate anybody, like Sam Cedar, like Dave Rubin is with Sam Cedar or Steven Crowder. But so yeah, let's just do this. Here we go. All right. You can hear
we hold
it, right?
these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed by their creator with...
By the way, don't be afraid to say pause, and we can like talk about what he's saying, okay?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
certain unalienable rights.
Because I'm going to do that a lot. Just saying.
Yeah, no,
So
I understand that.
This is our first response video, so bear with us, guys. We might be a little rusty on this.
That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That, of course, is the famous second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. It's a concept that's at the core, the very foundation of American society and government. The idea that your rights are inherently yours, that they...
I want to start off by saying that the Declaration of Independence is not like a governmental document. It was just basically an over-elaborate statement of grievances about it. Was basically a big fuck you to the Britain.
I do want to say during this point there's actually a great comment about this. Maybe he could improve it, but was the Declaration of Independence radical, right?
Oh, okay. Well, that goes in the context of like, was the American Revolution itself a radical sort of transition? When you look at it, yeah, go on.
Oh, so the concept that I think he touches on almost immediately within that is the idea of natural philosophy.
Yeah.
And the idea that was divorced in general from that was philosophers for a long time were moving away from the idea that God ordained this.
Right.
But even the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, the idea of natural human rights, actually found its way into the French Revolution. It found its way into even the Vietnam Constitution, where Ho Chi Minh was basically promoting the idea that people should be able to have these inalienable rights.
Well, it's funny you bring
Now-
that up because like Ho Chi Minh was actually very pro-American, and the fact that the United States government snubbed him for being a communist, yet espousing revolutionary rhetoric that is basically in line with the reason why the United States became independent is just absolutely ironic in that sense.
Oh yeah, I mean the ideas founded within that we can see ideally, right, the progress of humanity, and the next person that really harps on this is Richard Wolff, and I think he does a good job of it in his book Understanding Socialism. So I would love to be able to cover both his book Understanding Marx and Understanding Socialism. But
Oh, yeah.
a brief aside
We will.
is that John Locke was one of the first people that bring this up, and
Yeah.
he goes into it. But as he pretends that this is the end all be all and it's an inalienable right, I want everyone to consider just for a second that this is from a people that committed mass genocide against the natives, stole land, and kept slaves.
Yeah.
So John Locke and the rest of the liberals within that moment, while they believe that they should have this for themselves, they did not
Well, they
believe
excluded
that
it from other people.
Oh yes, they should definitely be separated.
Keep in mind that essentially, when the United States was formed, who was able to vote? White male property owners, which is a very small portion of the country at the time. So when you look at it, when you look at the American Revolution from a historical perspective, it was basically a bunch of aristocrats that just didn't want to pay taxes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they understood that they were on let's say they got in on the ground floor of a massive parcel of land that could be exploited,
Yeah.
where England was basically a little tiny island, which was just their origination point.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
let's
you contrast that with the French Revolution, which was obviously, yes, more violent, but also more radical in shaping the established order of things. Because in many ways, prior to the French Revolution, much of Europe was still living in a very feudalistic society.
Yeah, I mean I have a difficulty calling it feudal.
Well, I mean,
because
there wasn't like serfdom, obviously, except in Russia. But I mean, obviously, like, and I'm not saying that people were tied to the land, but they were tied with the burden of the taxation, while the landed gentry and the clergy basically leached off them.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I would say that we're still seeing that today.
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, I would also suggest that mercantilism was the predominant form of economics between the 15th through the 17th century.
Yeah.
The Harvard Business Review actually suggests that capitalism came over on the first ships when they boarded to America, and it was part of colonialism. But we'll pull back on that.
Yeah, let's just we were only 25 seconds in, so
only 25 seconds and we hit a tangent.
There we go. All right.
Pre-exist government, thus they aren't created by or given by government. They were always there, and government is built to secure them. Rights establish government. Government does not establish rights.
That's really interesting. So he's saying that these rights always existed. And if that's the case, why weren't they always exercised throughout human history?
What genetic mutation is the landmark where people can get rights?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this idea, the sense that these rights, this life, liberty, pursuit, and happiness have always existed throughout human history. You only, see it actually existing in the time that when these people existed, when they actually talked about it. Like, for instance, in ancient Rome, that their ancient world, like we'll go to the Roman Republic, for example. I mean, there was an institution of law and there was rights of a citizen, but I mean, that was prompted and propped up by the government, by the Republic. I mean, I wouldn't say that they naturally existed. And they
Oh, no.
obviously differed. They obviously differed what it meant to be a citizen of Rome as opposed to being a citizen of America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have to also admit that there were slaves in both societies, and they sure as shit didn't give them any liberty.
Yeah, that's true. Also, kind of a parallel for people who are following along with this. So, all right.
That is the framework upon which our entire founding and constitution are built. Still, this idea is frequently challenged in my email inbox and in my Twitter mentions.
And in response videos.
These are people arguing, hey, that all sounds great, but it's nothing more than flowery language. The reality is that your rights are, in fact, a social construct. Humans invent them, humans codify them. Your rights only exist as long as humans agree about them. And
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I already
It's a
like Matt Christensen. Yes.
Yeah. It's a collectivized mythology, I think, in that, right? Like, it's, if we all agree that people have that, then that means that we hold it important, because it only takes one tyrannical nightmare of a human to swing enough people to do it in a different fashion.
We should probably clarify that, my position at least. I don't know if you agree with it, but the rights, the only rights that you have are the rights that you fight for, and not necessarily for yourself, but also persuading others and seeing the benefit of having those rights for them as well.
Yes.
So it's a collective tool. So, like, yeah, you can say, like, I have the right to say what I want. That only has value if another person can see that as, like, okay, if you have the right to say whatever you want, then I should have the right to say whatever I want. And I see that mutually beneficial to both of us in an extent.
Yeah, I think we should refer back to Plato now, given Plato is all about the republic and he doesn't think that democracy is the best thing ever.
Plato basically was self-serving. Like, there should be the ideal style of government should be just philosophical autocrats. So I need to be the ruler. I'm like, oh, okay, Plato. So you're just basically special pleadings. Everybody needs to listen to you, obviously. Okay.
Yeah. But he did have a great point, which can be summed up to be, if you don't vote, you'll be governed by fools.
Yeah.
I mean, the other component with that is you can also see it. And quick aside, right? So this is by Carl Schmitt, who was a card carrying Nazi. The bastard's dead, thank God.
Yeah.
But basically, all politics are identity politics, and it's a struggle for power. And if you aren't taking part in making sure that you can protect yourself and ideally other people, if you're not a sociopath, that can quickly be taken away, especially when our system promotes a disproportionate amount of psychopaths into powerful positions.
Now, I could probably say that Matt Christensen is setting up this video where he clearly disagrees with us and is going to explain why these rights...
It's a Mott and Bailey, man. It's really bad.
Okay, so here we go.
And decide to protect them. In short, there are those of you arguing that there's nothing natural about natural rights at all. They are, in fact, unnatural human creations. So yeah, this video is going to be sort of fart sniffy philosophy, but understand, I'm not making this video for the sniffs. I'm not making this video so we can all congratulate each other on what impressive intellectuals we are. I'm making this video for the incredible importance of getting the answer to this question right.
Were we fart sniffing a little bit when we were discussing merits of rights? I just want to be self-conscious of myself.
I think the words fart sniffing portray his opinion on philosophy and intellectuals in general.
Well, that's the problem with right-wing thinkers, is that they have to be worrisome of sounding too intellectual, because most of their base is anti-intellectual.
Yeah.
So
rabble.
Yeah.
Idiocracy.
Yeah. Okay.
Debate is so fundamental not only to our country, but to the concepts of human rights and human liberty generally. So it's wise to take some time to explain the concept in detail.
I really hope he explains that it's not a contradiction to have property rights that are in contrast with human rights. I really hope he explains that in this video. I'm begging for it. I'm absolutely begging for it. But something tells me he's not going to.
Is this your first time watching this?
Well, I've watched it before, and so just to clarify, it was a while back. So I really don't remember much, but I can tell you within the frame, he's going to talk about, natural rights within a conservative right-wing framework.
Okay.
And that's how people, on his political spectrum argue what are rights and what are not rights. So he's trying to argue rights basically from an objective basis. That's basically the gist of it. So that's basically a synopsis of this video. So
Because rights are objective, obviously.
well, we're gonna find out if they are.
Why exactly are your natural rights yours and not society's? And what's so natural about them? Where in nature do they supposedly come from? And how can natural rights possibly be objectively defined? Those are all fair questions. And to those of you arguing the other side of this one, I can see why that language in the Declaration might not be satisfactory. We hold these truths to be self-evident, delivered by a creator. That sort of argument isn't usually satisfying to a curious mind.
Especially atheists, because basically, the whole premise of that the preamble and the first opening paragraph in this Declaration of Independence is that these rights, again, this is instead we're back then we basically made the framework of God-given right of kings to rule divinely to God-given rights to everyone. But
yeah, it's a very simple argument on that, and that's basically just coming from
We're
a
already-
place of limitations.
we're already hitting our first stepping stone, because there is a presupposition involved here that rights are given to us by something else. Now, obviously, they have a problem with just saying God, so they have to vaguely say creator in whatever
We can
context
put God as a generic omnipotent device. If you
Yeah,
want.
I mean, I don't know. This is basically trying to cover all corners here, whether that's the Christian God or if it's just a deistic concept of a prime mover. I don't know. I think it's that the idea of using creator is just a substitute to cover all facets of what we would consider divine right of rights. But okay.
It sounds more poetic than it does explanatory. Why are these truths self-evident? And how do we know that the origin is a creator? In Jefferson's defense, he was building a country, not necessarily writing new philosophy. The foundation was already laid by thinkers before him. He was simply building upon it. And hey, it's hard to dispute the success of that construction. The Declaration did what it was supposed to do. In my view,
Did it, or did a bunch of people armed fighting the British Army do that? Like, I understand that the Declaration of Independence was, given out publicly for soldiers to read. But I mean, I think we're putting. I might be rambling about this, but actually, never mind. Forget anything I just said.
My next thing is how many people could read. So there's a great book. It's called American Nations, and it specifically talks about the hotbed of New England, and specifically Massachusetts,
Yeah.
and about how that area was one of the most well-educated portions on the planet.
Yeah.
So while this man, takes a fart-sniffing view of intellectuals, thanks for being an intellectual area, just saying. You can actually read accounts of George Washington being very, very pissy about having to deal with the New Englanders, and specifically the people from Massachusetts, because they were questioning everything he said.
Well, I mean, that was the hotbed. That's where the American Revolution took place. I was just curious on the average continental soldier and whether or not how adept they were at reading. I mean,
It wasn't great.
Yeah.
It wasn't great.
the case for natural rights is best broken down into two segments, two separate but interrelated arguments. The first is the objective truth of it, the natural origin of your natural rights. And the second is the consequences for ignoring that truth. So let's get into it.
Oh boy, the origin.
Oh
What I think a
yeah,
lot of
man, you
people
got to watch
find
out because
dissatisfying about
sorry about that. That's my fault.
No,
You have to
Yeah.
So you have to watch out because immediately he goes into the
Epistemology of
truth.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, it. So I watched this week, and I will tell you, it is less than stellar.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, it is less than stellar. So let's go with
Okay.
About that self-evident truth and endowed by a creator language is it doesn't necessarily give you a traceable path to the origin of your so-called natural rights. It sounds like you're just supposed to take it as true, almost as a matter of faith. In this context, though, endowed by a creator could also be phrased as existing in nature. Natural rights have an objective, observable basis
Let's
in
pause.
nature.
Hang on a second.
This is an appeal to nature fallacy.
Well,
Okay.
I was gonna say he wants to argue that sure it sounds like our rights are endowed by a creator, but that could also be said as like, oh, it's just seen everywhere.
This is lazy. This is lazy thinking, and people that buy into it, like they have already committed what Albert Camus would say is philosophical suicide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we're off to a good start here. It seems that the foundation here is being built on sand.
Yeah.
They are inherent to nature, not simply invented and attributed to it. This is John Locke's basic thinking.
Ah, God damn it. Of course, there's always a starting point. It has to be fucking John goddamn Locke.
Yeah.
Like,
that was heavily influential on our founders. Consider what we call a state.
I'm sorry. Can I just say that John Locke was against landowners, like renters and stuff like that? I just want to make that an emphasis. So, are landlords necessarily inherent to property rights? I'm just because John Locke did not have very nice things to say about people who owned buildings to rent to other people.
Nor did Adam Smith.
Yeah.
But let's continue on that.
State of nature. Humans existing in a world free from government, free from organized society, the total anarchy of the unsettled wild. In such a place, what is it that guides us? What is it that we're driven to do? What is our purpose with only the forces of nature acting upon us? Nothing but survival, nothing but self-preservation, nothing but living to see tomorrow while we make more of us through the night. That natural drive for the preservation and the construction of your life and your property.
Why do we already have property?
He's obviously thinking about. I think he's associating with bodily autonomy as personal property.
Okay.
Which I guess you can make a decent argument for, but personal property is different than private property. Big key element to go on with that, and I do not think that he has that switch in his mind.
Well, I was gonna say, because this is how I think property rights started. One dude said to another dude, pointing at a bush of berries, "That's mine."
Well, so when we think about anthropology or just in general the study with it, you can see that there's territories that go through. We can look at evolutionary psychology and whatever you feel about that field. They'll say that you have competition within that, and by that very nature, you see that capitalism is natural.
Oh, is it now? Yeah.
What? Territories overlap all the time, and yes, there's some conflict that comes into that. But to say that survival is your only instinct, that just ignores the fact that throughout evolution, which I don't know if this gentleman believes or not.
Let's suppose that he does.
Right? Let's suppose that he does.
Okay. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
He seems like a smart guy. He's just trying to argue from a libertarian perspective, so he's got some excess baggage here.
Yeah. From an evolutionary standpoint, societies specifically, like there's a huge social element that comes into that, and apes are primarily social creatures, and humanity's major ability to overcome what has come in front of them is cooperation.
Yeah.
And empathy, and among those other things, and that's prior to the evolution of language. But let's
I
continue.
just want to say, like, he's talking about, like, living in, in nature, trying to survive. In what context is he trying to apply property rights in that matter? Like the tent you make to sleep in, the berries you pick to eat. Like, I don't. He just immediately drops property as it was always inherent. When I would beg to differ on that concept right there.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
That is what we call natural law. Nobody put you up to that purpose. You didn't decide on that purpose. It is innately within you. It's an inherent natural part of being a human being. And so it follows that any person violating that purpose, robbing you of the pursuit of your life or property, is violating natural law.
He is like jumping the gun here. When all of a sudden do we have property as a concept? Is this like within nature? Me taking your gazelle that you hunted? Would you say that was yours because you killed it? Is that the framework he's talking from, or is it like me fighting you over your berries that you suppose is yours because you found it first and that you're eating from it first? Like, I don't understand like what he's trying to apply within the concept of property rights.
He is trying to, I believe that he is trying to expand that property rights in themselves are natural.
Yeah, it's not like the Neanderthals and Homo sapiens arbitrated over a mammoth in a diplomatic manner. It was just in terms of like I don't know. This is where I'm getting confused here, like, because it seems like he's jumping the gun and like presupposing property rights as inherently existing, when in reality, I don't think he means he's trying to include property rights within a natural framework where in reality, property rights only exist because we have an institution of government that enforces that.
Yeah, and he also doesn't then suppose about the property components with the Native Americans, and often the time is well, they didn't have property rights, so I came in and said it was mine.
Yeah, basically. So we already have a subjective basis on what is property, what is the right to own something. Was that land or animals or something like that?
Yeah. So the other thing is that he's using this objective component for a subjective ownership, right? So like the subject, which would in his framework be us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the object would be natural resources. He's saying I can declare that this is mine. That is a human construct.
Yeah, based on what? Because you just say so.
Yeah.
And in many ways, this idea of that is basically propagated by the notion of might is right. I can say that this is mine because I will it.
Yeah. The problem is that people don't understand that property rights as they exist today are on two parts, and one would be we could go back to the master and slave dynamic. We could go, even back to Mesopotamia about ownership. But the big time that it came out would be within the enclosure of the commons, where it was, hey, you peasants that are collectively feeding your cattle on your commons, it's mine now.
Yeah.
Oh, what are you going to do about it? Well, I brought my army to help back up my claim. So GTFO. Right. And that is a thing that repeats itself time and time again for people that declare that property rights are self-evident.
Yeah. All right.
That is a violation of the natural rights you are exercising according to that natural drive within you. That's why we call these natural rights. These are what humans are driven to do before societies or governments ever exist. Accordingly, it is wise to...
You know what? I'm going to say societies existed before these rights. Because, again, going back to your concept of, like, we as, animals, as social beings, benefit by cooperating with one another. And as a result, society's built from that cooperation.
Bingo.
It's just, yeah.
Let's just go on.
Yeah.
Build a government that exists to recognize and secure human nature, not a government that exists to mold humans into some sort of subjective perfection.
Oh boy, here we go. Now he's
Let
calling
me be
us
clear
out.
that I don't think the argument that a certain idea is dangerous is sufficient in and of itself. I care, and we all should care about the truth first and foremost.
You care whether this is fucking true or not. This is why you're making this argument to begin with, because I have a social experiment. If me and you and him were the only ones that existed in the world, me and you believe that he didn't have a right to this property that he was doing, that was poisoning the only river that we could drink water from, and we took it from him, and he tried to fight for it. He tried to fight for his land. He tried to fight for his property, to do whatever he wanted with it and pollute the river. And we ended up killing him. Can it be said that his rights were denied?
He would say that my right of liberty, right, was violated, and it's an objective truth, because the justification for this is that the grand supposition makes me right, so then I can declare whatever I want to be is law.
But like this is the thing that I'm talking about. Like, rights are inherent. No, they're not. Because if everybody else agreed that he didn't have these rights, in what fucking context or frame could he actually argue them?
Well, he would be oppressing us, at which point we would say, "Oh no."
Well, he would try and defend his right, but let's say he failed. Can he like anybody else that still exists, suppose that he gets dies defending his rights? Can anybody else say that his rights were taken away?
If he speaks a different language, the answer would be no.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm getting a little too hypothetical in that scenario, but it's just like
not the potential negative consequences of the truth. The truth is always worth seeking, and we'll clean up the mess later. But the truth leads to prosperity far more than it leads to suffering. That's exactly why I believe the concept of natural rights is so strongly associated with prosperous society. It's successful because it's true. I hope I convinced you of that in the prior segment.
No, you didn't. And I know he tried to drop in a little. I just want him to say that again. Hang on.
So he moves to first. He does a false dichotomy, right? That's one spot. It's either true or it's not. That's it. That's the only option that can be, right? It's nothing is subject to interpretation. So that's the first part. And then the second one is that he then moves to a non sequitur, which says that if we don't obey this, society will collapse.
Well, that's what I was saying. I think he's taking a jab at every left-wing attempt to try and challenge that. Like, if you look at all the socialist governments that tried to spring up in existence in the 20th century,
yeah,
or I don't know if this guy, because I haven't seen any other videos, I don't know if he's one of those stupid people that also thinks that Nazism is socialism because National Socialism was the full name. But I mean,
so there's the Democratic Republic of, or DPRK.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, I just want to hear this again.
Strongly associated with prosperous society. Its success.
And that in itself is a fucking non sequitur, because, like, I've argued with people that, like, oh, well, we live in the richest country in the world. I'm like, well, what does that mean if the wealth is only shared by a small proportion of people?
Yeah. Well, most people in Canada have a better life than most people in America.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Anyway.
Because it's true. I hope I convinced you of that in the prior segment. Maybe not, though. Maybe you still think it's all just poetic fluff, and your rights really are nothing more than subjective social creations we all just decide and agree upon.
Yep.
There are significant consequences for operating under that theory, though.
Can we talk about the consequences of his fucking theory of rights before we continue? Can we talk about how basically you live in a world of little dictatorships that you have no exercise or influence of? I mean, people talk about, like, why people are generally apathetic with political life in America. I think it's because most Americans spend their life operating within very undemocratic organizations.
Yeah. I mean, that is the key with it, right? We have traded the tyranny of kings for,
The
in
tyranny of this
essence,
fucking guy.
yeah, that's exactly it, right? The tyranny of CEOs, and they're just as unaccountable as the kings prior. It's just that we say, they created this business, so they get to have the last and final say.
I mean, you can talk about how your freedoms are limited by what you're able to do because your life is tied to being able to supply yourself with some type of necessary income to, buy food or shelter, and that requires you working for other individuals who have more and are able to exercise control basically over your freedoms. I mean, would you agree? Yes.
There are multiple people from the beginning of industrial capitalism that will say that you want the proletariat or the working class to be in a state of precarity so that you have bargaining power at all
Right.
times.
Right. But yeah, anyway, I mean, it's the disconnect of him with, his framework, as if like nothing bad proceeds from his concept or his definition of what are rights, is astonishing. Like I could, be fair and argue, and maybe this is just me, that socialism is not the final answer. I mean, I could be a critique of myself. I mean, the situation is relevant to the times. So like, as of now, we live under a very neoliberal society where we're seeing very, very evidently the shortcomings of capitalism. I'm not saying though that what I offer is the final solution. I'm just, oh god, I hate that term, just how it sounds. Sorry. But I'm willing to be skeptical of myself in what works and what doesn't work. That's just me though. But yeah, anyway, if you have anything to say, I'll just continue.
Continue.
All right.
Consider the implications of that premise, that you have no rights that are inherent to you, only government permission slips, whether these rights are decided by a king's...
It's not government permission slips. It's basically who you're able to convince what are and what aren't rights. I mean, we use government as a facet to decide what are rights and what are not rights. I mean, that's, as far as I know, that's the only real way, as opposed to small societies where, like, if it was just us three together on an island, it would just be us collectively agreeing, like, okay, this is what we're going to do. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Decree or a democratic majority vote.
Ooh. You know what fucking irks me about libertarians is they're very like undemocratic approach to life. They have to be so critical of democracy, when in reality, because they have to do that because what they're promoting is basically a form of oligarchy.
Oh yes, no, so libertarians in the idea is with radical freedom, which ideally would be like self-evident determination,
Yeah.
right, of your own life. They don't want that. They also don't believe in compromise. Instead, they want the freedom for oppression.
This is basically what he's trying to argue. I mean, obviously, I don't think Christensen is a guy that's like, I want to oppress people, but he's arguing within the framework because he has this naive approach about, again, this idea of natural rights and stuff. But he's like failing to see that the understanding this concept leads to the problems that we have right now in society.
He doesn't understand that liberty, the principle of liberty in philosophy, is a compromise of autonomy in order to respect the rights of others.
It bothers me that in our country there are so many people that I hear this so much, like, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. It's that they're trying to insinuate, like, because they want to limit as much, democratic necessity or liberties of everyone else in order to preserve what they think are rights.
it comes down again to who has the power for self-determination.
I mean, this is why we have like gerrymandering. This is why we have voter ID laws, which is voter suppression. This is a reinforcement of that. When people say like, we're not actually a democracy, we're a republic, and you should be very wary of democracy. Hate it. At this point, it's semantics. There's no difference in calling us a republic or a representative democracy.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's like calling syndicalism somehow against representation. It's like you could technically kind of argue that it's a Republican or a representative democracy, but let's push on.
Get the freedom that they say you get, and that's all you're entitled to. Under this framework, your rights are the property of society.
Because we are society. What is society? It's not something abstract. It's people. Markets are not arbitrary. Markets are people.
Yeah, it's the same people that are making again, right? It's our rights are natural, and that humans shouldn't be able to say what we have are as rights. And I'm like, well, John Locke was a person there, homie.
We're not talking about abstract concepts here. These things encompass people. They are what make societies. They are what make markets. So when he's saying like your rights are not, created by people, yes, they are. You are a person. You are creating this concept. Whether you want to just argue within your individual self or you want to look at it in a broader collective framework. Sorry, I'm getting like really fucking worked up with this guy. Sorry.
Created them, society owns them, and society can take them away. And there's no inherent injustice in stripping those rights.
Replace society with a single person, and all of a sudden you have our critique of him. You have our critique of him. That's it. That's it.
This
is a semantic word salad that we're playing right now.
Yeah. But, that's the fart sniffing.
They were never yours in the first place. If I let you borrow my car indefinitely, I can take that car back whenever I like, on whatever terms I like. And there's no inherent injustice in doing that.
Okay, if I take your car, Kevin, you have a fundamental right to say, no, that's my car, because you have a receipt claiming that you bought the car based on money that is propagated by a government that also propagates this concept of property rights. And this government is formulated by people, us, that we agree collectively, like, yeah, that's your car, based on the circumstance and stipulations put for you to acquire said car.
Yeah, he also just makes the simplistic argument that I can say that I don't want you to drive anymore. Let's look at it this way. He's basically making an argument against public transportation.
Well, he's also trying to argue like, hey, this is my house you're renting, and you know what? I gotta kick you, man, if you're not gonna be able to pay that rent. So sorry, buddy. This is my rights.
Those are my rights to exploit the shit out of you.
It's my rights. I mean, my income is based off of your income because I'm leeching off of you.
It's a incoherent, logical conundrum that almost consistently comes about in libertarian circles. But let's continue.
Because it's my property. Under this framework, the same is true for every right that you have, up to and including your life itself. Your very right to life is the property of society. And you just have to hope that society manages.
I mean, that's true in a sense. This is why the death penalty exists. This is why we put people in jail.
It's why the draft exists.
Yeah.
And that's in your society about natural rights there, buddy.
Yeah.
Its property nicely, and you have no recourse if they don't, since it isn't your property anyway. If society decides to toss its property to the bottom of the dumpster, that's society's decision, and they're within their rights. And the consequences don't just impact our relationship with government, they impact our relationships with each other as well. If I observe natural law and deduce from it that you have a right to your life and your property that I would be wrong to infringe upon, that's an objective moral framework through which you and I can operate successfully.
No, it's not. No, it's not. We just
Again.
agree subjectively that this is mutually beneficial to both of us. And it's
So-
one thing. It's one thing for us, for me and Christensen, to have a house and we have our own garden and we grow our own resources. It's another thing for him to own the majority of the land and having other people tend his crops for him.
Yeah. I think the issue is within this as well is that he is complaining about coercion from other individuals, but he does not see a problem if he coerces others to be able to do it. Now, if we think that libertarianism, which is originally associated with the idea of a leftist thought or like a libertarian socialist with non-coercive state powers, then maybe we'd be talking about something different.
Yeah.
But capitalism is innately coercive.
Yes.
It
Yes.
is innately coercive because it allows the allocation of resources, and with that, an uneven distribution of power that does not necessarily move underneath a meritocratic fashion.
I mean, it's inherently undemocratic in a sense too. I mean, let's not pretend like the American experience is trying to defend, freedom, democracy, and tie it with capitalism. When if you look at our country's history, that's not the case. I mean, you can look at China right now. I am so far to say that China is communist in name only. I mean, this is what China is, basically a state-run capitalist society now, where the state is directing capital, that allocation of resources, basically.
Oh yeah, no, I think David Harvey makes a great point as well when he talks about how the leaders of China understood that by allowing capital to influx in with the capitalist mechanisms, they understood how it was going to flow. And we can continue to see even now, they're not looking at a centrally administered government or a transitory state.
I mean, they're walking capitalism like a fucking dog right now, basically. Tight leash.
Yeah. And right now, Xi Jinping is pushing it towards, they're not setting arbitrary goals and they're just going to what the market determines. But I'll quote JP Morgan Chase in saying that we should be careful with that because the market can fail.
Right.
In instances such as, I don't know, the consequences of using fossil fuels. That is, in their words, a market failure.
I'm just bringing up China as an example that capitalism and freedom and democracy do not always go hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at best, right? The USSR and China are both transitory states.
Yeah.
At best. Highly totalitarian regimes where you'll see people now, they keep on using that word, and I don't think they mean what I think it means.
Right.
To quote Inigo Montoya, they just got to throw a Princess Bride reference in there,
of course,
man. They're like, oh man, this is your first experience of communism, and I'm like, what the fuck are you smoking?
Right.
There's a difference between totalitarianism and communism, but let's go. Let's go
on a tangent here.
There's a right way for me to treat you, and there's a wrong way for me to treat you. And we've arrived at that conclusion.
A subjective basis.
Based on what is observably true in nature, not based on any one random person's feelings spitballed at the wall. It's a structure that says nature determines right and wrong.
Do you believe that nature itself is also kind of like the nature of society that we live in is set by people and how they inhabit the world?
Yes. So I would say that the way that he is using nature is just a alias for a god or creator when he continuously says this.
Yeah.
With the presupposition that these truths or these ultimate portions of reality are presupposed within this and predetermined. And yeah. let's continue on with
Humans don't simply create it. If instead we operate under the idea that humans create right and wrong, then it's simply human agreement that defines morality. There is no inherent rightness or wrongness in how I choose to treat you.
That is true. You look at history, look at the perspectives, look at how things have changed, how ideas have changed, how the structure of government has changed. That is true. That is true because it is a human concept.
So he's making an argument, and he'll say it later. He'll say the words moral relativism.
Yeah.
And he'll make that argument. And I think, like, you'll look at Noam Chomsky or Amartya Sen, who look at kind of like this Kantian idealism or like Rawlsian justice and ethics. And they'll push towards like, oh, we're always trying to go towards a subjective truth. There is some sort of definitive goal in progress, and it's usually good. I don't necessarily agree with that. His big thing is, if you look at the Foucault Chomsky debate, Chomsky walks away and says that that's the most amoral man that he knew.
Well, this goes back to what I was saying. Like, I'm not a subscriber to utopianism. I don't know if I have the best answers. I'm critiquing the current world that we live in, because I'm admitting myself that human development is a continual process. There's not one final philosophy that we're going to fall upon and be like, this is it. And I feel like the way that Christensen is arguing, the natural rights concept is like the final phase of human development. We can't go past this anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes me think back to the 1990s when they declared the end of history.
Oh, right.
After the fall of Soviet Union. And, oh, hey, guess what? It's not.
It just depends on who agrees with me. If I murder you and the king is on my side, there's no inherent wrong committed. If I murder you and 51% of people don't have a problem with it, there's no inherent wrong committed. That's a recipe for moral relativism, where what's right here today is wrong over there tomorrow, not based on anything observably true about the world, just based on the feelings of the person who's in position to decide at the time.
This is a kind of a hypothetical question, but do you think it was right to execute the Romanov family?
Yeah. Okay. Let's also think about it this way. Oh, I objectively murdered him. I took his life. What if it was in self-defense? And you're in a trial by your peers, and they're trying to determine if that situation was just or not. Now, that's the current legal framework that we're operating in.
Yeah.
And most libertarians would say, oh, yeah, you can kill someone in self-defense. They're violating your liberty. Well, you just went against that. You just literally went against that by saying that 51% of people can't say that, right? Like, you need to be convicted beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's the whole. Those are important things within our legal framework that you're so proud of.
I mean,
right?
it goes to what I'm saying. Like, was it wrong for Italian communists to fucking kill Mussolini and hang his dead body in Milan after everything that he did? Was it wrong for, the Romanian military to have a tribunal on Ion Antonescu and fucking just execute him by firing squad after everything he did, how he mismanaged and, ruled as an autocrat in Romania? I mean, Christensen would probably argue that, well, I mean, that was justified because he violated the rights of others. But again, that itself is a subjective basis. What is just, like, what is right and wrong?
Based on collective agreement.
Yes.
That is chaos. That's injustice.
Is the nature of the world chaos or not? Because he wants to argue like, this is nature. Natural rights come from this nature. Is nature chaos then? Then isn't like his critique of us just an admittance of how he thinks nature should operate?
So this is another interesting point on a comment that I was pulled into, and I think that this moves, unfortunately, within a slight Overton window. Okay. Is that conservatism, based on American political science, those people are primarily more orderly, right? Consistently on the Ocean psychological personality questionnaires, That's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Well, they're about maintaining the status quo, basically.
Yeah. Jonathan Haidt makes the same argument within his book, The Righteous Mind.
Yeah.
Versus you look at the people that he classifies as more liberal, or more progressive. They don't care. They aren't as conscientious, but they're open to more experiences, right?
Right.
And they're more focused on error detection. Versus they're willing to have some level of ambiguity, right? Which is what we're advocating for, versus this gentleman is saying there's a right and a wrong and that's it.
Right.
Nothing else.
Seems like a pretty privileged position to have, too.
Yeah.
That's atrocity. That's suffering.
Oh, okay. We're going to
In
consider
closing,
hypothetical.
let's expand upon that concept with a hypothetical. Let's say there are two neighboring states, one normal state in which cold-blooded murder is criminalized, and another weird state in which cold-blooded murder is perfectly legal and culturally nobody really has a problem with it.
This is stupid. This is immediately fucking stupid. This is a stupid premise. This reminds me when I read Sam Harris's The Moral Landscape, where he tried to argue like, a society that thinks it's culturally significant to pour battery acid on every firstborn child is not going to succeed as a society because they're destroying their own next generation, basically. I mean,
let's listen to this. And
Okay.
Let's
All
have
right.
something fun. It is stupid.
Okay.
It's going to be very easy.
okay.
Murder away. It's like Las Vegas for killers. Is murder morally wrong in the first state, but morally
Fallout Vegas.
Caesar's Legion.
right in the second? Is it merely the human creation of laws and cultural norms that makes that decision? Or is murder inherently wrong in both states? It's just a question of whether the humans there choose to acknowledge that objective reality. If you believe that it's inherently wrong in both places, regardless of whatever the people there say, that is a natural law position. It's not that people just got together and decided that murder is wrong. It's that murder
Let's pause
fundamentally
Yeah, can we let's set something up. What is the definition? Let's start by
So
what is the definition of
this
murder?
is a straw man, period. let's
all right.
start there.
Okay, go on.
Right. Second one is that he completely ignores historical precedents and saying that you could still turn in a scalp of an Amerindian, right?
Yeah.
And get your entire year's salary for a child's scalp.
Right.
Okay. Now, that society would say that it's wrong. Well, ideally, in times of progress, we can now say that.
Right.
Did they then?
Well, I was going to say that murder in and of itself is the unlawful, keyword there, unlawful premeditated killing of another human being. So, in order to commit murder, you have to break some law. If the hypothetical country that Christensen's saying is that it's lawful to murder, it's not murder.
Yeah. Which again brings it to the next point, right? Like even let's look at Thomas Jefferson or Martin Luther King saying something very similar. If a law is unjust, it is on behalf of the people to disobey it, right?
Right.
To change it, to get those things going. And justice in our country is based on common law and continual precedence and evolution of those legal situations. It's not some divine text descending from the heavens like this gentleman wants it to be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, let's remember there have been 27 amendments to the Constitution, so obviously we had to make some changes. This was not something just immediately set in stone like the 10 fucking commandments.
I'm an originalist, though, man. What did the founding fathers mean?
I don't really give a shit what the fucking founding fathers mean at this point, because
I'm gonna
they've been fucking
transport
dead for 200 years. If I brought back Thomas Jefferson to this time, he'd be like, "Whoa!" He wouldn't be like arguing like how the principle of rights has changed. He'd be probably like, "Wow, what the fuck is this? Why
Yeah.
are black people allowed to vote?"
Yeah. Well, there's another quote from Thomas Jefferson, right? He
Yeah.
goes, "I shudder to think that if God is just, right, because of
right.
what my country does."
And again, yeah, I am somebody that does not put the founding fathers on a fucking pedestal. I really don't. I'm gonna say it right there. They weren't infallible. They were
No.
wrong. The
They're
fact that we
not
had to make
some-
amendments to the Constitution makes me clear that, you know, when the founders founded the country, it wasn't perfect.
No, and they are not in any point to be deified. Don't hold men as heroes or gods because you'll often be disappointed.
I don't even hold Marx to that deal.
No, no, he had
But
some
at least
things wrong.
show to the people on the right, at least show some fucking continuity. Like, you know, meet us halfway here. I don't hold Marx to a fucking pedestal. Don't hold these fucking people on a fucking pedestal either, okay? All right, anyway, let's go.
Violates your purpose as a human being. That's why it's wrong. Not because any particular group of humans says so, but because it's contrary to nature. That's why our country is built the way it is. And that's why it's so crucial to start with nature and build government upon it, not start with government and try to rebuild nature from there. I hope this video explained these concepts in an understandable way, and I gotta say thank you to those of you who challenged me on it. You've demonstrated
You're welcome.
exactly why no idea should be shielded from criticism or challenge. My mind hasn't changed on this topic, but thanks to you, my perspective on it has really sharpened, and that outcome is just as valuable as changing minds. Natural rights and objective right and wrong are often difficult, amorphous concepts we sort of know to be true at a gut level, even if we can't explain them very well. This was a great exercise in explaining them. Not only is it a good feeling to know exactly why you believe what you believe, I think it's actually an obligation for any intellectually honest person. So thanks for holding me to that standard. And of course, any rebuttals from you moral relativist degenerates out there.
Whoa! Shots fired! Shots fucking fired! What's he gonna call me
As he
next? A
says,
fucking
he's-
cultural Marxist?
Hey man, we all know where that really comes down to.
In our defense, we were kind of like being heavy on him, so okay.
There-
He was
well,
preempting like the critiques of this video.
I would say he was about as sharp as a couch cushion. So I don't even know if that's going to be. We can obviously see that the fart sniffing degenerates over here are really the ones that are making progress here. So I guess real men eat ass or something. I don't know.
Real men do eat ass, by the way.
Are always welcome. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Twitter. That is at.
Okay, I think he's done. I just realized something. I think my flag's upside down. I should be like him. Okay, well, yeah, final thoughts, I guess.
Final thoughts. I mean, I am not a moral relativist, or at least I don't think I would describe myself as that.
Well, I mean, do you argue morality from an objective basis, or is it subjective? No. Okay, well,
I would say it's subjective.
Well, then, yeah, that is in essence moral relativism.
Yeah,
this is the people like him and Jordan Peterson have a problem with. The issue, however, is when they try to argue from an objective basis, they are, you know, they're hiding the fact that the foundation of their objective basis is itself subjective.
But I'm usually moral relativists will use their position in order to try to be able to defend something that others would be able to consider abhorrent, which was his straw man with the murder.
Yeah.
And that's why our country is great, but ignores everything in history.
I mean, I'd recommend people to watch Philosophy Tube's video on Jordan Peterson, where he basically he expounds more on this in terms of like, you know, an objective moral truth is still based on a subjective basis. In essence, I mean, the whole foundation just falls apart like a house of cards when you really look at it. This is an illusion that he's putting up.
I got some good videos that you and I would either be able to review or we'd be able to talk about.
I'm totally for this. I actually like doing this. This is really fun.
Okay, so here's the next thing that we need to do is we need to get our buddy David.
Oh, okay.
Our buddy David's currently getting his doctorate in psychology. So it would be interesting to see what he thinks about our good boy JP, who is currently having trouble walking and talking.
Yeah, how is he doing? Is he like? Last time I heard, he was almost a vegetable.
Yeah, that's his.
I mean,
own
I don't
fault.
listen. I want everyone to know. I don't wish death on Jordan Peterson.
No, no.
Despite
Um,
everything I disagree with him on, I don't hope that he dies.
Yeah, I just find him to be an
I would-
extraordinary hypocrite.
I would just find it ironic that he died because he's eating raw meat.
Oh no, that wasn't the situation. It was
Okay.
he was horribly addicted to barbiturates.
Oh.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah. So then he went underneath
see. Did the lobsters put him up to it?
no, he went to Russia for a forced detox, which is entirely against it. No, if you have anxiety and you need like clonazepam or something to be able to help you during those extreme moments, that is okay.
Yeah.
That is okay. Also understanding that those are terribly addictive drugs is another thing. But in his book and in his work, he advocates that you shouldn't throw stones from a glass house. And if you can't deal with it, that's your fucking problem. I mean,
Are you saying you reap what you sow in this regard?
No, I mean, in his case, yes. But I mean, it's just incredibly hypocritical and unfortunately terrible to see someone go within that. Again, I don't want the lobster daddy to die or anything.
No.
And that's a very hard lesson to learn. But for a guy that is most of his research is in dealing with alcoholics, and then he himself comes to addiction after telling those people that they're weak.
I mean, let's not forget that he also shit on a lot of transgender people. So
Yeah, no, he's
depending
not,
on who you are, your sympathy will probably vary. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
It's just-
we should talk about him and get
okay,
we'll
yeah,
get some-
I'm all down with talking about the big old JP,
yeah, and
Big
then we
Daddy.
can talk about
Big Daddy, clean your room.
yeah.
The unconventional title philosopher of incels. I know he doesn't like that, but a lot of incels look up to him though. So
So do Nazis. What
Yeah.
about the Jewish
oh
question?
yeah,
I'm just telling you, man. Those incels just want a big old lobster daddy dom.
it says something about your philosophy if you attract Nazis. I'm just saying. You should really take even. I'm sure Christensen, like this guy, probably is not too worried about attracting Nazis because again, he's still approaching things from that libertarian viewpoint. But I've seen a lot of libertarians that would, degenerate. I'm going to use the term degenerate now. Degenerate themselves to like alt-right figures, but they
Yeah.
started out as something else, like as libertarian.
Yeah.
Or
I'm
even,
an expert on
like
Nazis.
even weirder. They started out as anarcho-capitalists too.
I think it's more of a tendency towards the right wing myth of meritocracy and the utter ignorance of centralization and accumulation of capital. Right. That's where we are with that
Yeah,
because
we can do JP. We can do Stefan Molyneux. He's a fucking.
oh my god, he's a
kook.
weirdo.
He's a kook.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
can do it.
we-
We can just have fun, and we can just make fun of Steven Crowder for all I fucking care, because he's like shooting fish in a barrel. Like,
Oh my god. Well, with dynamite.
seriously.
Let me just set this around here. Yeah, let's do that. Let's start with JP and then we'll get some other people involved.
Okay.
But,
All right. Sweet.
If anyone wants to contribute any questions or any suggestions, we would also love
Oh
to
yeah,
hear
let
them
us know.
and talk
Let us know. We'll talk about anything. We're not. This is the free marketplace of ideas, literally here. Like we're
bringing free to markets.
Yeah, here we go.
All right.
So, we're not a bunch of cucks. Although I'm sure a lot of people that dislike the video probably think we are, but teach their own, I suppose. Sorry, we made fun of Christensen. I mean, Christensen's probably a guy I would have a beer at the bar and talk to him about this stuff, as opposed to like somebody like Steven fucking Crowder. I'm just saying. So.
Yeah, I'd at least take a whiskey because it really need me to dull my senses and tolerate that garbage.
So, but okay, I think
All right.
I think this is good for another episode of the Much Better. I like this. So yeah, we're getting good. I like the flow of this. So yeah, let's continue
Again.
doing this shit.
If anything's worth getting better at first you're gonna suck.
Yeah, I know. You probably still suck to a lot of people, but whatever. Okay, well, thanks guys for watching. So we'll see you next time. Take care.
Adios.
Adios.